is the thing. Try to take in as much as you can. Take notes, and I mean, you're gonna change. Talk about a perk. I don't always dedicate a whole talk to a perk. Like, imagine me coming up here and talking about, one little tiny feature, but that's what I'm going to do because it's so groundbreaking, and we're going to be so immediately competitive in the space. And so let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin, why we're concerned about it, why we're talking about it, why it's a big thing that's going to be added to our platform, and how you can benefit from it. And I've done a lot of talks on this in a lot of different places, and I started to leave a few little snippets of this on Lifeline, and Oren said, why don't you just take a slot and just give that talk? I can tell you've been talking, I've been interviewed on the radio and all this stuff, and on the radio when you're interviewed, you get these little sound bites. And hosts, if they don't know what they're doing, they'll ask you 2 or 3 questions in one question. So tell us what Bitcoin is, how it works, and what the blockchain is and everything, and can I spend it at Starbucks? And you try to explain, and then they cut you off. You haven't even started your answer. So I've gotten real good at like when you're arguing with your spouse. You're scared to laugh. All right, so let's talk about that. So the story begins, and I left a Lifeline on this the other day, but the story begins 2,500 years ago, actually, in the kingdom of Lydia. Lydia was an interesting kingdom. It's in modern-day Western Turkey, and it was only 3 generations. It was a dynasty that only lasted from grandpa to grandson, and then they were overtaken by the Persians, King Cyrus, I think. But they did something really amazing in that reign. King Croesus did 2 things. He coined gold. Now, to that point, as far as historians can tell, to that point in human history, money had always emerged. It had always just been something that kind of got agreed upon between people, and they monetized it good because it wasn't good for much else, and it was pretty scarce and hard to make more of. When they talk about hard money, they mean hard to make more of it. And so people had always just kind of gotten together and decided what would work to trade. People, sometimes you hear this story about they would barter, and I'd try and trade my fish for your apples, but I didn't want apples, and you only wanted some fish. It's a coincidence of wants, and the barter society. There's actually no proof there was ever a barter economy as the main economy. There's no proof that mankind started with that. Because as far back as we can go, we find gold and silver and bronze and seashells and salt and weights and measures, and we find out about these things that were going on. The Old Testament scriptures talk about it 4,500 years ago. And so this stuff goes back a while. But King Croesus comes along and he coined gold. He coined gold for the first time. He stamped a lion's head on one side and something on the other side. And every coin was fungible, which means one coin was worth exactly what all the other ones were worth. So it didn't matter which coin you had, they were all exactly the same. Now you didn't have to weigh stuff to spend it, you just produced a coin, everybody knew what the value of that coin was, because King Croesus had coined and said that's what this is worth. So that was the invention number 1, coinage. And it's with us today. But the subtle secondary invention there that we're dealing with now, and it's the reason Bitcoin exists, it's the reason we're talking about it, is that put government in the money. Mankind had been doing fine with money, without government, and King Croesus put government, he invented government-sourced money. And it wasn't very long before 2 realizations dawned on King Croesus and his ilk, his type. Number 1, we can monopolize this and be the only ones doing it. And number 2, we can cheat. And those thoughts probably occurred within seconds of each other. So what happened was, very quickly, governments became the only issuers of money, and they would imprison or kill you if you tried to make your own money. And so they demanded that it was their right only, and so kings would offer their own money, would issue their own money. And the reason this is such a great thing to do is because you can cheat. You can cheat by putting more of it out there at lesser value. Now, the way they would do it when it was precious metals was they would bring back in the coins, melt them down, stick some lower value metal in there that you couldn't tell, and then issue the coins back out and say they're worth the same amount, but you put 30% more of them out there, and you keep the 30% for yourself and use those to pay for your wars, or building your castle, or whatever you're going to do with it. And so that was what happened 2,500 years ago in the 500s BC. And it was very quickly that governments took over money, and that's all any of us have ever known, that the government issues the money. And governments began cheating almost right away. The reason it's bad when they start to debase the currency is because it causes inflation, which means more money is fighting for the same amount of goods, which makes prices go up. When prices go up, it means the money you already have is worth less. You follow that linkage? Now what that does is that robs you of the value that you've got stored in that money. It's an invisible taxation, and worse than that, worse than the fact that it's invisible and not voted for, is the fact that it's regressive, which means it's a Robin Hood tax. It steals from the poor and gives to the rich. It's like a drunk Robin Hood who got disoriented. And you say, well, how could that happen? Well, because number one, the rich have assets. And when there's inflation, money flows into assets and the prices of assets go up. Our lake house went up a lot in value since $4 trillion got pumped into the economy in the past 2 years because of COVID. So I've made off real well because of inflation, because I have assets. But the guy who's living from hand to mouth, who's just barely making it, and has his wife's waiting at his van for the paycheck on Friday at noon when the paychecks come out, and she rushes to the bank to cash the check. Probably she goes to a check cashing service that takes 7%, and she races to the grocery store to hurry up and get food, and then she has envelopes and she's barely making it. When that money becomes worth less, and you don't have any assets, it's a double whammy. They don't have any assets to ride upward like I do, and that money is all they have. So when it depreciates, it's a bigger percentage of what they have. You follow that? So when the politicians campaign on this glaring and worrisome growing gap between the rich and the poor, it's kind of disingenuous. Either that or they really don't understand economics. Because as soon as they get in office, what do? And I'm talking about candidates on both sides of the aisle. What do? They overspend. And when they overspend, they have to issue, the only way they can get by with overspending is they have to borrow. And when they borrow, that inflates the money supply, which drives that gap. See how it goes? And then they can't, it's just horrible. So we're going to do more central planning to fix the mess that central planning made. No. It'll never happen. You can't fix with the problem. Put more of the problem in is never going to be the fix for the problem. But that's what takes place. So how is inflation like this possible? Well, because our money is called fiat currency, it's by dictate. Fiat's French word means dictate. Government just dictate. They say it's money. You have to use it. Gun to your head. You have to pay your taxes. This is legal tender. Don't try doing anything else. And don't try making your own money. Because it's illegal. We're the only ones that get to do it. And it's not controlled by anything. So the story of how that happened is there used to be something called a gold standard. Most of you understand what that is, at least roughly. And it was that the dollar bills they would issue were supposedly tied to gold, some certain amount of gold, and you could redeem them. You could go to the bank and demand $1 worth of gold for your dollar, turned in. And that was true. And that was largely true for much of the developed world in the 1700s and 1800s, which, by the way, is one of the most, they call it the Belle Epoque, where it was one of the most productive, expansive, inventive eras. It birthed the Industrial Revolution. It basically birthed all the things that let you survive winter and live to be 100 and all. All of that came out of the flourishing of solid, hard money that actually didn't inflate and wasn't debased for almost 200 years. And then along comes World War I, and Europe, most of Europe goes off any kind of a standard because they have to inflate their money supply in order to pay for weaponry. And that kicked off a complicated thing. I'd love to give a seminar on it someday. About 8 of you would probably come. That started at the beginning of World War I and ended in 1971 when the entire world was now completely off the gold standard and all currencies of the world are entirely fiat. They're all entirely by dictate and they're not controlled by, let me get to that in a second. So one of the things people have a hard time understanding about Bitcoin is they say, I don't understand, it's digital money and you don't see it. It's not backed by anything. And the most hilarious statement on this comes from Alan Greenspan. He ran the Federal Reserve for 20 years, which is irony within irony, wheels within wheels within wheels, like the angels in Ezekiel, man. And he said, the thing about Bitcoin I don't understand is it doesn't appear to be backed by anything. Like the trillions of dollars you printed when you were at the Fed. You understand not being backed by anything. What's really going on is nothing's backed by anything. Nothing is backed by anything. None of the currencies of the world are. Not the dollar, not the euro, not the yuan, not the renminbi, none of them. They're not backed by anything. The question is, what are they controlled by? They're controlled by central banks, which generally mean a handful of people who are really good at being bureaucrats and think they're really smart, who go into a room privately and determine the price of money for the rest of the free market. It's controlled by bureaucrats, a small, tight little circle of appointed elites. Bitcoin is not controlled by bureaucrats. It's not controlled by rulers. It's controlled by rules. It's controlled by a computer program. The issuance of the US dollar is in the hands of people who have been educated to believe an economic model that doesn't match reality. Bitcoin doesn't follow any of that stuff. It just follows hard written code that anybody can see for themselves. The issuance of Bitcoin, it's written out. We know exactly what it is. The dollar, how much of the dollar is going to, we don't know until we hear Jerome Powell emerge from the next meeting and disseminate and try to speak obliquely on television, and everybody's got to kind of figure it out and sift through it. What did he say? So Bitcoin is controlled by rules, not rulers. And what happened with this inflation is, as the money supply expands, you get all these malinvestments, you get all these dislocations in the economy and all these different things that happen. And one of the things that took place as a result of this, by the way, one of the best books to truly understand this is Exposed by Warren Woodward. It's magisterial. It's really, really good. He's got such great scholarship in that book. Excellent research, smoking guns, charts and graphs. You're not going to read that book in one plane ride, but take your time and get that book in your brain, because it totally shows what happens here. It all kind of boiled and came to a head in 2008 with the financial crisis. Y'all remember that? That was the result of financial shenanigans. And there was a group of people who've been working for about 20 or 30 years, and they self-named themselves the cypherpunks. They were cryptologists and computer scientists, and they've been wrestling with this idea of how to make a money that wasn't government money. As a matter of fact, one of the economists in what's called the Austrian School of Economics, Friedrich von Hayek, there's a neat little YouTube interview of him, and he's an elderly gentleman by this point, quite advanced in age, and he says, the only thing that can happen, we're not going to be able to take money control out of the hands of government by force, but the only thing that's going to happen is maybe there's some way, in some sly, roundabout way, somebody can come up with something that they can't stop. Now, he said that in 1984 or 1989, I can't remember. 84? He said in 1984, and he was right. Decades later, someone actually did. These cypherpunks, this little group, an anonymous creator named Satoshi Nakamoto, launched something called Bitcoin on the world in January of 2009, and it was exactly the reversal of what King Croesus did 2,500 years ago. It was the invention of non-government money. All of a sudden, it gave the people an alternative source of money. Some have called it freedom money. We call it people's money here tonight. And all the technology that Bitcoin came up with, blockchain, proof of work, all these different things you hear about, buzzwords that people have tried to dislocate from Bitcoin and carry off as though they have a value on their own. Those things all came about to try to solve the puzzle of what decentralized money was. And Bitcoin can be complicated. It's a little bit computer science, a little bit economics, a little bit of geopolitics, history, finance, game theory, stuff that, most people are pretty versed in. It's just when you put them all together, I mean, seriously, how many people out there walking around are quite adept at computer science and economics? Just those two. Like, not many, right? Just your brother-in-law is the only one who knows everything about it. But you don't have to understand really how it works. It's good to know why it came about and what it came to fix. But you mostly just need to know what it does. Your customers don't really have to become Bitcoin experts. They just need to use the platform. It's going to be that simple. But let's dig a little bit deeper just to give you a basis. Money is three things. It's a store of value, number one. Number two, it's a medium of exchange. And number three, it's a unit of account. So a store of value means that you work hard, you get some, and then you can set it there, and it holds value, you can spend it later. So it stores value through time. Okay, store value. Medium of exchange means I can exchange it for something else that I want. Unit of account means it's priced in that. How much is that Tesla? Oh, it's 2.5 Bitcoins. So you can see we're not there yet, right? So let's talk about store value first. And I believe that Bitcoin's adoption will grow in stages. It'll begin largely with that first one, then seep into the second one, and eventually creep into the third one. Kind of seems to be how it's going. So store value, one of the reasons it's superior savings technology is because it has a limited supply. The US dollar has an infinite supply. That's at the whim of a governing body and they're acting in the best. I mean, I don't believe they're malicious. I don't believe they're evil. I don't believe they're dumb. They're super intelligent. I just think they've been kind of miseducated on how the economic system works, and they have a false belief in the ability of a small group of people to do the thinking for a large group of people. Sound familiar? That seems to take place a lot in this world right now. Bitcoin gets rid of all that. It doesn't depend on rulers. It just depends on rules, as I said. And it's pre-programmed with a limited supply. There'll only ever be 21 million, of which about 19 million have already been issued. So not only do we know the total amount of pieces that will be involved in the game, we're also told, if you read the code, the issuance of those pieces and how it'll happen. It's all scripted out. And so a certain amount is given out as the game is played. I'm not going to go into any technical details in this talk, but a certain amount of bitcoins are issued as the work of the network is being done by the computers. And if it goes too fast, there's difficulty adjustment that makes it harder, so it slows it down. Because if the game runs too quick, then the money's coming out too quick. What's that remind you of? What we deal with already. We've already got that. And if it goes too slowly, then that's a problem too. So it has a difficulty adjustment. It looks how the players of the game are doing it, and it modulates it to keep the pace the same. And so because of that, because we know there's only 21 million, and because we know the pace of the game, you put those two things together, and you can see that's going to run out somewhere in the year 2140. You'll be a lot older then. Hopefully you'll have a lot of Bitcoin by then. This all combines, this is the important part for store value. This all combines to make Bitcoin the scarcest thing in human existence outside of our own time. You hear what I just said? It's the scarcest thing you can come around outside of the precious hours of your own life. Listen to this, it's the only good of any kind whose supply does not respond at all to demand. It's unlike anything else that you can put your money in. They can always mine more gold. When the price of gold skyrockets, like it is right now, it's up to over $1,900 an ounce, the miners are cranking it up, man. They're gonna find more, and they're gonna spend more and invest more, because now there's room for more profits, and they're gonna bring up more than a 2% growth. It might be a 3.5% growth next year, who knows? But they can always mine more gold. They can always print more money, and boy, haven't they. Or have they? They can always issue more stock. Governments and companies can always sell more bonds, and they do. They can build taller skyscrapers and condos along oceanfront properties. But they can never make more Bitcoin beyond what's already scheduled. For this reason, it's an insurance policy against government overspending. As the government overspends and debases the currency and robs invisibly the value of the currency, Bitcoin over here runs according to a preset schedule that nobody can change. It's an insurance policy against government overspending. Somebody said, well, how do you know Bitcoin will go up? As in up in price. And I said, I don't know for sure. But I know for sure government spending will. For sure. Like anybody you want, I guarantee you government spending will increase on a macro level over time. It's number go up technology, they call it. By the way, past performance doesn't predict future performance. You got to be careful of all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to get you to invest. I'm explaining why it's going to be valuable for people to have Bitcoin rewards in an app that they don't have to. They're not investing through us. They're not buying Bitcoin through us. They're living their normal life using our platform to do it and accumulating Satoshis, which are the penny of a Bitcoin. Our penny is 1/100th of a dollar. A Satoshi is a penny of a Bitcoin. It's 1/100,000,000th of it. It's 8 decimal points of a dollar. So when your customers open up their app or their platform, whatever omni-channel we ever use to deliver all that stuff, they'll see Satoshis displayed there. All right. So people have called it number go up technology because it's so scarce. And as adoption and interest grow, and you increase the demand on something that can't respond with supply, what happens to the price of that supply? It goes up. That's why it's gone up so quickly. It took, I think, 42 years for Microsoft to hit $1 trillion market cap. It took 12 for Bitcoin. It's faster than Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. It's the fastest we've ever seen anything get to $1 trillion valuation in just 12 years. It's adolescent. It's 13 years old now. It's a little teenager still learning how to dress. There's never been a 4-year period. If you took a little 4-year caliper, stretched it out 4 years, and put it on the price action of the history of Bitcoin, there's no 4-year period you can slide those calipers across where it goes down. So if you have a time horizon of at least 4 years so far, and it's 13 years, that's been a pretty good time horizon. The number go up technology seems to work. When you zoom in, it's wild and crazy. When you zoom out, number go up. Make sense? So far. Picture this as like a digital property land grab. And all this means it's a much more secure place to store the hard-earned fruit of your labor than in dollar bills, which Michael Saylor, the billionaire, said is like a melting ice cube in the sun. You can look at Bitcoin as digital property, and as a matter of fact, it's the birth of a new asset class right in front of us. How many times do you get to see that happen in a lifetime? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and that's about it. They've been around for a long time, and all of a sudden, a new Bitcoin comes. It's amazing. The second thing is medium of exchange. In addition to everything I've just said about the store of value properties of Bitcoin, the medium of exchange, Bitcoin is also a global network. A global network. It can handle payments of any size, anywhere, at any time, between anybody, without any permission. You could send $1 billion to somebody exactly on the other side of the world, and it would happen in a short amount of time for a little tiny fee, and nobody can stop you. Nobody even has to find out about it. It's amazing. Try sending $1 billion any other way. Because of that, it's very good for global money movement in certain circumstances. Remittances. Do you guys know what remittances are? If you've got someone who immigrated to let's say, to come to the United States, and they're working really hard, they're trying to support their family back home, whatever country it is in the undeveloped world. They're struggling family, and they live on $2 a day, and someone's here working hard and saving as much of their money as they can and trying to send it home to grandma. Right now, it's very difficult to send that money to grandma because the services that exist, I won't mention the company's names, but they take anywhere from 8 to 17% of the money being sent. There's fees all along the way, there's permissions, and it's very dangerous at that office in the other country when grandma goes to get it, because everybody knows that's where the money arrives. It's a very difficult, cumbersome, and expensive and unfair process. Bitcoin, as long as grandma is connected to the network in some way, and almost all the world has a smartphone, even if lots of the undeveloped world skipped desktops and hardwire internet and dial-up. They skipped all that and went right to mobile when that came out. I mean, you go to some of the poorest places in the world and they've all got these. I don't have time for all the stories. I was going to tell a good story. We'll get that later. But now, that immigrant working hard to send money home to grandma can do it for almost no fee, almost instantly, with no permissions. Nobody even has to know grandma's receiving it. It's super good for remittances, and it's only getting better. There's more and more services being built on top of it to make that better and better. Number two, if you're trying to fund missionaries, because a lot of times it's the same situation. If you use that channel I talked about, it's expensive and cumbersome and dangerous, but a lot of times countries don't want your missionaries there, and they'll kill them for you if they find out they're there. So how do you get them money to live on and support them? Well, Bitcoin handles something like that just fine, hypothetically speaking. Or what if, forget sending it around the world, what if you're in a spot where they've really blown up the currency, like Zimbabwe or Argentina is happening now, or Venezuela, or Lebanon right now, and from one day to the next they raise prices in the store every single day, and what if you're in a place like that where Bitcoin's really good just to use right there? Just get your paycheck, quickly convert it to Bitcoin so it won't melt so fast until you need to buy something, you convert it back out into the local, and so it's really good for that too. By the way, you probably don't want to use Bitcoin to buy coffee at Starbucks. I get asked this on every interview I'm ever on. Well, how do I buy coffee at Starbucks? Like, why does everybody want to use Bitcoin to buy coffee at Starbucks? I don't understand. There's nothing broken with the dollar at the exchange level. There's nothing wrong with the dollar at the exchange level. There's nothing wrong with it. It works totally fine. Anywhere in the United States, it's super simple. Everybody accepts the dollar. Now, they don't accept big dollars sometimes, $100 bills and stuff. They won't. Terry and I were at a restaurant one time, there was like a crayon written sign hanging up on the cash register, and it said, "Due to circumstances, we no longer can accept anything larger than a 20. Due to circumstances, whatever that means. So they didn't exactly accept US dollar as legal tender there, but that's another story. But there's really nothing wrong with the dollar in terms of spending. You don't need to take something that's a superior store of value, the best savings technology we've ever had, and liquidate it in order to buy a coffee. You probably don't want to. I did once to buy gold. It was already an expensive bulb. Now it's a painfully expensive bulb. It's the most expensive wakeboard boat on the lake, I guarantee it. Get it? Because I liquidated Bitcoin to buy it, thinking I was cute, and I'd buy it on profits from Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin went way up. Don't do as I've done, son. The third thing is unit of account. Unit of account means it's priced in that. We're really not to that point yet. Bitcoin is truly dominating now as a store of value. People are waking up to that and understanding it. As a medium of exchange, it has very specific uses in the global network. But you really don't want to, in a place where the currency still works for exchange purposes, you don't want to liquidate the best savings in the world to do the exchanges. But then unit of account is when things get priced in it. We're really not there, and I don't care if it ever gets there. I like the first purpose of Bitcoin myself. But it probably will get there, and it will get to a point where you'll buy a home and so many Bitcoin. It probably will get to that point. So there's two groups of money that people have. Think of it this way. This one over here is what you might call discretionary. This is money that you don't really need. You don't have to have it. Some would call it savings. Unfortunately, it has to be investments nowadays because you really can't save. And then this money. It's why inflation kills them so much, because they have to spend almost everything that they have. The way it works, I would say at the moment, is the dollars work just fine for your ready money. They work just fine here. Going in and using dollars to spend something. But over here, they're like a melting ice cube in the sun. So when you have discretionary extra money, you have to invest it. You can't save because it's gonna melt away. So you have to invest it to at least outrun inflation. Inflation is 7.5% right now. If you take out things that you don't spend much money on anyways, I heard Paul say up here, food and energy and housing. I mean, who spends any money on those things? So outside of those things, it's about 7.5%. If you measure the basket of goods that they put into CPI the way they did 20 years ago, it'd be like 15%. But anyway, let's just take the 7.5%. You could just go to your bank, ask them for their best savings account. Has anybody heard of any of them that are even over 0.2%, like 20 basis points? It's so funny. Okay, so you can't save, you gotta invest, you gotta find, maybe if there were superior savings technology like Bitcoin that came along, where it wouldn't melt in the sun, then maybe you could put some discretionary money there, so it would sit there and have value. Gold's a good one here too, although Bitcoin seems to be outrunning gold. Anyway, that's the idea. Does that make sense? So dollars are still good for this, but probably not good for this. Okay? That's where we're at right now in the United States. That's one way to think about it. What about this? What about all the other cryptocurrencies out there? I love the interviewer where they keep wanting to say cryptocurrency. Which one's the best Bitcoin? Funny things like that. Let's see if I can get this straight. There's only one internet, right? The internet got invented once. There is no other internet, right? Is anybody all fired up about the other internet? There is no other internet. And there's only one internet of money. Inventing non-government money, like inventing the wheel, only happens once. We got it. Non-government money. Just like there's no other internet, there won't be any other Bitcoin. You got that? It's decentralized, distributed, non-government money. It's the people's money. All other cryptos should be thought of as companies that run on Bitcoin's technology. They all pull off little pieces of Bitcoin's technology. Now, they won't tell you that because they're busy trying to be the new central authority when they try to sell you on it. Like Oren said, everybody wants to be the new central power. I don't like what the government doing as central power, but I wouldn't mind being the central power. I'll be a little central power. It's kind of funny. You can look at all the rest of the world of the cryptocurrencies as dot-com companies. When the internet was invented, there was all this hype and euphoria around the things that could be done on the internet. And there's all these dot-com this, dot-com that, and all this crazy excitement, hype, and irrational exuberance, to use a term that I've already quoted a guy here tonight. But most of those companies went bust. Lots of them were scams, but a few of them were real and became very valuable. Amazon, Terry was talking about, was one of them. Salesforce is another. There's some that showed up, followed real fundamentals, took advantage of what the internet offered, and built something real. The same thing will happen with the other cryptocurrencies. There'll be a few that solve real problems, have real applications, that do real things, and they'll be valuable. But think about this. When have we ever come to you and talked to you about a tech company and encouraged you to buy their stock? Why would we do that now? I'm not interested in cryptocurrencies and the latest coin this and the latest coin that. Most of them will be dust as soon as Gary Gensler at the SEC decides to go ahead and fully regulate them as securities. Because almost every one of them, if you go through the security test, every single one of them, almost every one of them, when you go through the security, they come up security. Bitcoin is the only one that doesn't come up security, because there's no central person, there's no central committee, there's no central point of failure. They couldn't even arrest Satoshi Nakamoto if they wanted to, because he stayed anonymous, and then he had the nerve to disappear. A decade ago. It's been gone a long time. But there's some very interesting technologies taking place in the cryptocurrency world. Smart contracts, DeFi, NFTs, and all these things. But beside the point, we're talking about non-government money, the best savings technology ever. And we have a great, elegant way to bring it to the customer. And by the way, if you meet someone and they're all in love with the latest coin this, the latest coin that, great. Use our platform, accumulate a bunch of Satoshis, withdraw them into your own wallet, and then change them into whatever crap coin you can find. Excuse me, let me say that over for the recording. And exchange them to any other technology that excites you. Only you'll know what I really said. All right. That's a really quick flyby of why Bitcoin and what it accomplishes, why it's so unique, and why we are really positioned. If you look at the things that are out there, there are a handful of Bitcoin rewards credit cards, and they give 1.5% with all kinds of limits. There are a couple apps where you can load up money into the app. Well, no, you can't. You have to get their debit card. Generally, you have to buy their debit card, and they're happy to charge you $150 a year for the thicker one or whatever. And you load money up onto it, and then you can get up to certain percentages. Ours, when they're super platform subscribers, they get 4%. We're going to be immediately in the fourth. We're not just entering the space, we're entering the race at the front. It's like something you'd see in the movie Cars, where one of them, goes zipping out front. That's what you're about to do with your customers. If somebody is not interested in this perk, great! Keep using the app, keep getting cash back, and they don't have to use e-wallet at all. If somebody's interested in Bitcoin, great! Man, if we got something for you. If somebody's curious, doesn't know a lot about it, hand them Orange book, hand them my book, and say, all you gotta do is use our platform, and you'll get started. When I'm interviewed on the radio, one of the things people always ask me at the end is, well, how should people get involved? What's the best way to get started? And I always say, get educated first, and buy just a little bit, because once you're in, now you start learning from being in. And that's exactly what we can do with your customers. They can just start using the platform. They can read the book if they want, but they start accumulating a little bit when they go get their 2 before or whatever they get. They start accumulating a little bit of Satoshis, and they start seeing how it goes, and they start watching that total build. It's pretty cool. And so we've really got this broad top of the funnel that appeals to so many people in so many ways, and we've added a super perk that almost nobody has, and the people who do have it don't have it as good as you're going to have it to offer. And all we've done is made you more relatable, more interesting, and more attractive, so that you can talk to more people more meaningfully, longer, to find out if they've got a dream that they're willing to fight for. And if they don't, they're a fantastic customer. And if they are, we've made the funnel so wide, we've given you a better chance of finding them in the first place. That's the point. That's the purpose of it. That's why we're doing it. That's what